Hi there, it's Dr. Judith Briles, and we have another a really fabulous episode today that involves your writing skills. Now, a lot of times people think, well, writing and characters and bringing it all together is only fiction. So not true. So not true. In today's writing, your nonfiction has usually peoples in it, stories about people, something to reinforce your points, and how you present them with the right adjectives and the setups makes all the difference in the world. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And with us back again is Mara Purl. And as always, I like to start with a little quote from my Snappy, Sassy, Salty Success book for authors and writers. And one of the things that we always look at when we come in, and it's just going to do something with writing, and it's just simply this: fiction writers have the nectar gift from the writing gods. Their imagination and fingers know no boundaries. Now, I'm going to add in another quote from the book. Don't write someone else's walk your own, and then you write about it. So,
Oh, yes, I couldn't agree more.
at the same time, I just saw that pop up. So as always, we're not going to have any breaks, commercial here, but we always like to thank our sponsors, AuthorU.org, which is the membership organization for authors who desire to be seriously successful. And if you haven't explored the website, go to it. It's AuthorU.org, and just become a member. We do all kinds of things. Once a month, at least once a month, sometimes a couple times a month, we do free programs like we do here, and they're workshops more, but they're free to our members. And if you're not a member, you get to pay for it. So just saying. Also, the Book Shepherd, which is what I do consulting, and the amazing book designers, cover designers, website designers, Rebecca Finkel at fpgd.com. Certainly explore her website. And then Nick Zellinger of nzgraphics.com. They're both award-winning designers. I've had the pleasure of working with them on multiple books of my own, as well as they're the first people I refer my clients to. With that said, we are going to start into an awesome, and it's all about creating crystal clear characters. Very cool. With this is an author herself, just happened to have won 70 plus. Amazing series. In fact, I have her latest book to show you all. So there's Mara, her name, and then we have When Hearts Align. So we call this the Heart series. So if you like small town fiction, like a small town like California Central Coast, discover this. It's one that, there are multiple series that actually, Mara's a pioneer in women's fiction using that small town concept. And the series actually started on the radio, like the BBC, where she pioneered award-winning that got unbelievable response. So with that said, I'd like to just jump right in, Mara, if we can.
Love to.
With your permission. All right. So let's talk about how do we create crystal clear characters that stick. That stick. I think that's the right word to use. How do we make
Yes,
them
that's
stick
perfect.
that people want to know? I was at a book club just the other night, and someone said to me, I just listened to your second book in the secret Hamlet. When is book 3 coming out? That's what you want to create
That's right.
for your
Yes.
reading. People want the next book. So people want your next books. How do we make those crystal clear characters?
Right. And you want characters that people care about, and that's why they want to read your next book. So what's going to happen to them? What decisions are they going to make?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to begin with a detailed character profile. And
Oh, okay.
you're going to continue to work on this and add to it and let it evolve over the course of. Now, I am mostly going to speak about writing a series. Standalone novels are fabulous, but the marketplace today is very, very primed for series. readers have always enjoyed them, and we now have delivery systems that make, getting a series to a reader easier than ever,
Mm.
whether by ebook or by print on demand. So there's another thing to think about, is that you want your characters to evolve. Um,
Yeah.
Here's something that I hate to complain about an author I really do love and admire. But some years ago, Sue Grafton wrote the Alphabet series, and it's a series of
I
mysteries,
read it.
right? They're fabulous.
Yeah,
And we
I
love
read it.
Kinsey Milhone, her character. I
Yeah.
just would say, for me, there was one flaw, which was
Oh.
I didn't see a lot of evolution in Kinsey. So, book after
Mm.
book, you would come back and you could count on her to be smart. You could count on her to be wry and a little funny. You could count on her to go have some outrageous meal with Rosie at the diner, things that was like, oh, good, we're going to have one of those scenes. However, I remember in one of the later books, here's Kinsey going down an alleyway. It's dark. There's a dumpster. And of course, you're screaming, don't go down that alley, which we would have anyway. But in particular, we didn't want her to do it because in a previous book, she had been attacked by somebody lurking in a dumpster. So did
Mm.
Kinsey forget? I don't think so. She was very smart.
Mhm.
So there was a little glitch, I think, in evolution. So let's see a character say, oh, I already got that lesson. I don't have to get that one again. Make a better choice as they go along. Or let's say your character's a bad guy. Let's see them make worse and worse choices as they get more and more entangled in the crimes they're committing. Again, it's evolution, and you get more and more fascinated because it's an unraveling, an unfolding story. So just begin
Mm.
with, a page about each of your characters and start to fill it out. Where were they born? Did they come from a wonderful family, a terrible family? Did they come from a different country? Did they have a good education? Did they have no education? Do they have street smarts, or do they have intellectual learning? And then position your characters in a pantheon where they're not all the same. So you don't have everyone with the same level of education and everyone with the same kind of background. It's more interesting to have, you get more possibility for conflict, to have characters who have essential differences, who have to struggle maybe a bit to understand each other. And that's enriching for readers because you're inviting them to understand somebody who may not be similar to them.
Mhm.
So there are some particular techniques that I think are fun. And so that's why I created this program you mentioned, Crystal Clear Characters.
Mhm.
And just two tools for doing deep dives that are very interesting and fun. One has more to do with the heart and intuition, and one has more to do with the head and the intellect. And so one of them is color, and then the other is Myers-Briggs, which is a personality testing system. They're both really interesting. So let's start with just thinking about color. So as you have done this beginning of a profile for a character, well, what color do you think of when you think of them?
Mhm.
Do they have a favorite color? Is this somebody who, everything is burgundy, um, her day planner, her purse, her phone case, her favorite coat? Or do you have somebody who's just absolutely rainbow, loves all colors and doesn't care about matching particularly? Or do you have someone who's maybe an investigator and they wear black and white? And that's kind of how they see the world. They see the world in black and white. You
Yeah.
can use color overtly or really subtly to highlight something that's going on in a character. And so, we have phrases in the language like true blue. Well, if you have, a wonderful, let's say, police character, Maybe you want him in blue. You want to associate everything to do with
Mhm.
blue. Maybe you have this very dynamic, passionate woman and you just think of red, the car she drives, you know. So you can use it for lots of different things. It can be the clothing, it can be the decor of the home, it can be the car, the accessories, it can be memories, it can be favorite spots, a hotel that he loves to stay in when he's on the road, and there's a turquoise wall. Use your creativity and your imagination and play with it.
And what you do is you take the reader there,
Yes,
which is where you want to do. I think you do that brilliantly in when you set up your coastal descriptions, and I'm there. Of course, I know the coastal. I lived in California for a
yes,
gazillion years, was born in California. So I was up and down that coast. I was a beach rat. So it's,
it's
it
home
works for
territory for
me.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, it was familiar territory. So when I read something and it opens up, then it triggers my memories
that's great.
of things. So back to when I was a little kid. And that's when you develop everyone. That's how you start. You throw out the line and you start reeling in what becomes a super fan. And that's what your
You know,
characters can do.
what you said about the fact that you actually know California, and some of my readers do, a lot of my readers do, but I have readers in
Mhm,
other parts of the country and other parts of the world.
mhm,
So research, tremendously important.
mhm,
If
mhm,
I say that the bottle brush blooms in the wrong month, well, one of my California readers is going to say, And you can
mhm.
only afford to make one or two mistakes like that when they start disconnecting from you. You don't sound authentic anymore. You haven't done your homework. You're not believable.
Mm.
So those little details are quite important.
Oh yeah, and I know, as a Californian, although I'm Colorado now, but as a Californian, that where my roots are, that when we went through a heavy rain season and then the flower blooms came out, it was a kaleidoscope of color that
Yes.
filled the hillsides. And there is almost nothing like it to try to describe it. It's just an amazing experience to feel.
Yes. Those like the hillsides carpeted with fuchsia,
Carpeted.
bright yellow, and
Hmm.
like a quilt, a tapestry. It's amazing.
Yeah. All great words, people, to use.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Metaphors. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a story I know that I've told you before that this reminds me of. I write a coastal series, so of course, and it's the West Coast, which means I got to write sunsets. Well, how many sunsets have been written about in literature, right? And how many have I myself already written? So, okay, one day I'm up in the Central Coast. I go to my favorite little beachy spot and I sit there and I say, I am going to come up with a new metaphor today for the sunset, and I'm not leaving here until I get it. Well, the
Cool.
sun starts to go down and nothing's
Mm.
occurring to me that hasn't occurred before. It's an orange ball sizzling down into the water. Yeah, yeah, I used that in book two. Can't use it again. And so
Same
now,
ball.
the sun completely goes down and now I'm freezing and I go back to the car and I get my fleece on and I'm sitting there. I am not leaving until I get the right thought. And finally it came to me, something I had never thought of before. And I was like, yes. So then that went in the next book. And frankly, that is the job. If you want to take this seriously, I believe you have to be that committed to freshness and to your own perspective, your own voice as an author. That's why they pay us the big money,
Mhm.
is to get something that nobody else has written just that way.
So Mara, I now you've teased us. How did you rewrite the new sunset?
Well, you'll have to read that book to find
I
that.
have read that book.
Well,
You got to help me out.
now this one, what I thought of was more of a metallic um,
Mm.
visual, and it was like corrugated steel.
Wow.
And I had really never seen the ocean look just like that. And I
So the
haven't seen
ocean
it
colors
again
it.
since then.
Yeah.
So it's really neat. It was there.
Yeah.
I just had to really listen for it, wait for it.
Oh, yeah. I'm a sunrise person, and I will get up. Living in Colorado, we have some amazing sunrises here. Where, when I'm down in Arizona, amazing sunsets. In Florida, Key West, amazing sunsets. But the sunrises we have are so majestic with the purples that come up that fuse into the oranges and then the reds. Not a lot of yellow, sometimes yellow, but usually it's these deeper jewel tones then crisscross. And if you have any cloud formation, oh, the treat you get as they ripple, literally ripple and they create waves. I mean, it's so cool to
Well,
see.
and there's a person who knows Colorado is going to tune in right away
Hmm.
to
Mm,
understand whether or not you have been to Colorado and you have
mm,
seen those. And autumn is another thing. In New England, there are a lot
mm.
of reds in the
Oh,
autumn,
yes.
but not in Colorado. We
No.
have the goldens, we have, the
Hmm.
aspen, and it's a different hue. And
Hmm.
I love the idea of writing about an autumn in Colorado because it really doesn't look like anywhere else.
Mm, mm.
So
Very different.
that is part of the job. And again, we can use color in our descriptions, color in our character elements. And then, you can go deeper. You can do a color profile. Did you ever have your colors done years
Hmm.
ago right?
Hmm.
So why not do that for our characters?
Love that idea. I think and then that really does set up how they're going to wear it, a dress, how they're going to create their home
Yes.
life and surround
Yes.
it around. I mean, I love purple. That is my color.
Yes.
And I even have my grandson said, "Oh my God, Grandma, oh my God." I have and I love it. I have a purple um, uh, a steering wheel that is soft in my hands, and you can see
Yes. Love it.
all of you, I'm still challenged with my hands, and the holding on to it, the gripping, especially because we have winter. We have a cold winter here
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Um, Having that in, of course, I do have another friend who has a heated steering wheel, but I love now bringing in your color, but you have the texture, you have the feel of that material underneath my hands, and it's almost as I drive. It's a soothing, it's a comforting deal. I mean, I'm just thinking, why didn't you do this sooner? So,
Well, there's an evolutionary element for a character who, if there
hmm.
were a character, something like you, that maybe when she's younger, she's busy, she wants to get there, she's in and out of the store and so forth. That's her focus. But now with a lot of the basics in life, she has mastery over all of that. Now
Hmm.
she's looking for, where can I make my life, just tweak it and make it better. And this little moment of comfort is one of those things.
Hmm.
It's great. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
really lovely idea. So I have a character who is an autumn, which is definitely not me. That's not my color palette. So it's interesting to think in a different color palette than myself when I'm writing her. So she's a redhead. She has that sort of gold tone to her skin,
Hmm.
um, where I don't look that great in brown. She looks sensational in brown. The color consultant that I went to years ago said, "You're a winter if brown looks cheap on you and black looks expensive."
Ooh.
Isn't that interesting? And you're an autumn if the reverse. If you're an autumn, black looks sort of cheesy and cheap on you, but brown looks rich. So I thought about that and I thought, well, she has amber jewelry. Um,
Hmm.
she has burnt orange sweater, that kind
Hmm.
of thing. And it's
Hmm.
been fun. So the moment we're in a scene that's featuring her, especially if we're in her home,
Hmm.
that's the whole palette. So I can play with that. And it's a visual memory that readers tell me they're never confused about where they are or who's speaking if we're with Samantha, because they get that visual color cue. So, that was interesting. There are 4 seasons. That's how they do the color consultation. So you have autumn and spring
Mhm.
and summer and winter. And, you can look it up and add that to your character profile. It's just, some readers
Mhm.
won't notice it intellectually, but they might feel it anyway,
Right.
you know.
Exactly.
And then some people will go, "Ooh, I love that. I love that." And
Hmm.
so then you can also use color to highlight conflict. So if you
Mm.
have, to be overly simplistic, you have your blue character, your true blue guy, and then you have um, a very aggressive bad guy who's you think of as red. If you bring those colors into the scene, then you're underpinning the sense of tension, or you
Exactly. Yeah. So,
pick
if you
colors
go
that,
back to your sunrise and sunset
yeah,
or sunset, you would see often, depending on where you're, the reds, but you could really, if you're writing, if you have conflict with triggered this, but the depth of her anger matched the brilliant reds that were going across the sky at that, why
exactly.
wine was being served. All of a sudden you realize, oh crap, she's really pissed.
That's right. And that expression, seeing red, right?
Mhm.
It comes
Mhm.
from something. It comes from lived experience. And so
Mhm.
you fold that into your character. It's
Mhm.
powerful. It's authentic.
Mm. Mhm. I like it. I like it a lot. So I hope those of you who are listening in, watching in, do pick up that how powerful color can be used to set the stage, to set your scene, to exit it, to create tension, to create calmness. That you can do so much with color.
Hmm.
And the mood comes in. You're talking about moods and all
Totally
kinds of
does.
things.
Yeah. When you think of pastels, and you think of a
Mm.
soft summer day,
Hmm.
and you think of the dynamic Colorado winter with what it
Hmm.
looks like for a white, jagged mountain, with black trees highlighted. Um, as you say, each one of these descriptions brings that reader right in and sets the mood.
Hmm. I always think it's helpful if people will not go away um, uh, from the familiar. Start with some of this writing and these samples with what you're really familiar with, so you really know it. Like, I do know California pretty well, and Mara certainly, because she splits her time between California and Colorado. So she knows those areas but if all of a sudden, you're writing about the deep South and you've maybe been there once, you got to do a lot of work.
You do. Yeah. Well, and we just returned from New Zealand and
Mhm.
had a fabulous time. It's a beautiful country.
It
And
is.
my character, my protagonist, will be going to New Zealand. So while we were there, I
Mhm.
asked a zillion questions, took hundreds of photos, and made a lot of notes. There are distinctions, sounds, colors. There was a particular color of the water where we were kayaking. We kayak all the time in different locations, but had never seen water that color, you know?
Mm.
And so those distinctive things are going to be important in writing that
Hmm.
story.
Mm. That sounds fabulous. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next evolution
Yeah,
as you go on. Well, so I hopefully that everyone has picked up what you can do with the emotions, the feelings, the scene setting. Sometimes just silence, though, if you've got color involved, it could be worth 1,000 words. Isn't that what you say? Pictures is worth 1,000 words. So
that's right. And you
you're
use it well, and it can be. Yeah,
you're writing a picture. You're
you're right.
writing a picture and take them.
That's right.
So now, and you mentioned Myers-Briggs
Hmm.
at the start of our time together. So how do we start integrating the personality that comes in? I mean, I'm familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality type test. Um, There are certainly a lot of them out there. They all have some commonality. So I think maybe Myers-Briggs may be the granddaddy of them. I'm not sure
It
of the
is, yeah.
evolution.
I mean,
Okay.
it was started, interestingly, during World War II. In the
Hmm.
United States, the men, as we got further into the war, the men were away
Hmm.
fighting, um, either in Europe or in the Pacific. And the women were then left at home to do the jobs that the men had been doing. And so we get the expression Rosie the Riveter. Well,
Hmm.
there literally were women working on production lines, creating airplanes and munitions and many, many things. But the women, having not been in the workforce in that way, were trying to figure out, what would I be good at? And so this woman and her son created this test really for the job market. And so there are four segments to it. There's extrovert versus introvert,
Hmm.
which for the most part is fairly simple. And, it's fun. You do it on yourself, and then that helps you when you want to do it on your characters.
Hmm.
So now for me, it wasn't so simple because I'm exactly in the middle. I'm half extrovert, half introvert.
Hmm.
And then it kind of makes sense because you look at my life, half my life is introvert. I'm very happy being in my office writing. But then the other half is I'm out there speaking, teaching, and that's the extrovert part.
Hmm. I love the analogy during COVID you used about that, and you did it about yourself. That might be a good share. Do you remember how
Oh,
you
well,
used to talk
just
about
that,
that?
my introverted self was delighted. I didn't have to go anywhere. I got all kinds of
Yeah.
writing done. I was happy
Yeah.
as a clam, and then my extrovert self was desperate. I thought, but it took me years to get invited to be the speaker at this writing event and that, and will it ever come back? I opened the front door one day and Larry said, "Are you going somewhere?" I said, "No, that was my outing." It was tough. It was a tough time for
Yeah.
everybody, one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I take the test, I am way over on the extrovert side.
Oh, really?
And the introvert sometimes just when I want to be alone, but that doesn't last long, you know.
Well, your introvert self must be highly productive, given you've written more than 40 books. So there's
Mhm.
some powerful introverted aspect of you.
Well, we write fast, right?
Yeah. So
So we
then
can, yeah.
another indicator is called sensor or intuitive. So the
Okay.
sensor is somebody who trusts what's certain. It's got to be concrete. They don't like new ideas unless they've got practical application. They're realists. Intuitives trust inspiration. They like new ideas and concepts just because they're new. They value imagination and innovation. And so, isn't this interesting in terms of characters? You could have two colleagues who work together. Maybe it's two cops, and one is this, realist, and the other was going, "Yeah, but my intuition is telling me we ought to go check on such and such." Well, they're
Yeah.
both valuable, but they're really different, and they can lead to big arguments. So that's conflict, which is good in a story.
Hmm. And it happens. And well, you need conflict in your writing.
You really do.
If you're doing novels, people, you need conflict. And
Yes.
even I always had my own little formula when I was when I was thinking because of of my books, the great majority, 90% were nonfiction. I came from
Yes.
that side of the world. And I was always think I have a problem. What's the causation of it? What's the effect or the impact on the environment of it? And how in the solution, how in the heck are we going to get out of this mess? And but then I started thinking, fiction has the same kind of thing. There is a problem. There's a causation. It could be created by your main character or some other oddball. And then you've got all the ripple that goes on out, and we've got to get to some whether it's the happy ending or resolution in the process. So, I always think along that way.
Yeah. Well, your characters have to go, from A to Z. They have to get there.
Hmm.
And how are they going to
Hmm.
get there? And
Hmm.
so a third indicator is thinker versus feeler. And the feeler is
Okay.
the empath. That so I'm listening to an audiobook now, which is a police procedural.
Hmm.
And the investigator is very sympathetic to a mother who has lost her child. But one of her colleagues says, you're looking and investigating everybody else. But isn't it possible that that woman actually killed her own child? Well, she couldn't look at it that way because she's too much of a feeler, too empathic. But her colleague is somebody who can stand back and look at fairness, balance, justice, not get engaged emotionally. Again, this is a great thing to use in juxtaposing characters and enriching, your story. Even if you're writing, let's say, memoir,
Hmm.
as you remember something that's happened to you that you wanted to share in your memoir, you might consider these techniques and then like position, like, yeah, that boss, I kind of liked him, but on reflection, he really didn't treat me fairly. And so you might have a revelation yourself that comes up as a result of writing, that segment of your life.
Hmm.
And this could be helpful to look back at somebody that you had to work with and say, well, were they a thinker or a feeler? You know? And
Hmm.
then finally, there's judger or perceiver. And so a judger is somebody with a tremendous work ethic. They want everything organized. They're happy after decisions have been made. I'm going on a trip and everything in my house is organized and I don't have to
Hmm.
worry about that. A perceiver is somebody who's happiest leaving their options open. So here's a moment. My dear friend Erin and I were going to be roommates for about 6 months years ago. We decided I would move into her house. And so I brought a box of spices. And I said, where do the spices go? And she said, there or there or there. And I'm standing in the middle of the kitchen. And I'm going, but where do they go?
Yeah.
And she couldn't tell me. And so, I put down the box and I said, okay, I need to understand this. And we're very similar people in like 100 ways, but in this regard, we were different. She's a perceiver. And she said it made her feel claustrophobic if there was only one place the spices could be. She wanted options. Whereas for me, when I'm cooking the eggs and I want to reach for the dill, I want to know exactly where it is. In fact, my spices are even alphabetized so that I can grab exactly, right? So you and I have that in common. So it's interesting. I was just startled. I couldn't understand what she was talking about, but I understood it better
Hmm.
after we went through this process.
Hmm.
So again, let's say you're writing about two roommates, you know, maybe you're writing about two college students and here they're trying to combine their lives, or they're in their 20s and they have their first house and they're trying to work these things out and they're driving each other crazy. They love each other, but oh dear, And so you don't want to just make things up because it'll
Hmm.
feel phony to the readers. You want to have
Hmm.
that underpinning to say, well, why does it bother the person, if
Hmm.
the spices have to go in one particular place? So,
Well, and that's where you get all these different personalities going on. I mean, when you were talking about, I have one, you've seen it, a gigantic spice drawer, all appetized, and they're all in little jars. Everything gets moved from cans
same.
into glass jars. And then I also have two other interior racks in my pantry hanging. Now that's where stuff gets clustered. Like I have all kinds of different salts and I have all kinds of different peppers. So they get their own rack
Oh, that's
for all of
fabulous.
them.
Well, you're a fantastic cook. You're a fantastic cook. Maybe you'll have to reveal when you talk about your new cookbook, you'll have to reveal um, how you store the ingredients that go into your cooking, because that can mess somebody up. It can mess up your timing when you're cooking if you don't know, what you need to reach for and where it is.
Mhm. Well, some people don't even know what to reach for or to try, to experiment,
Yeah,
and then as you know, some stuff just doesn't go together, so don't do that. But you only learn that by experimenting. That's not
yeah,
usually a thing you may feel doesn't right, but until your taste buds tell you no.
right. Well, wouldn't it'd be fun and funny to have a character who absolutely can't cook but thinks she can, you know, in being a roommate with somebody who's really a very good
Hmm.
cook.
Yeah,
That'd be a good way
e-
to drive each other.
exactly. So you have all that going on, and it
Yeah.
makes such a difference on all that. So I love that. Well, let's kind of like put this together. How do we mix them all up as this happens?
Well,
That
I think
you've got these, we've got these 8 components. You know, when do you decide the mixing happens?
I think you go back to your character profiles and, enrich them, deepen them.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then as you start to write a scene, these qualities will start to emerge in the dialogue and in the
Uh-huh.
descriptions. And then you
Uh-huh.
can go back and say, wait, what did I say about, oh, yes, Samantha. Yeah, she's somebody who she loves tea, not coffee. Um,
Hmm.
she wears burnt orange, not red. And, sort of keep yourself honest about what's going on with each character. Honestly, if you don't do it, your readers will, you know,
Hmm.
they'll say,
Hmm.
hey, you said her
Hmm.
car was gray and now it's green. When did that happen?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you need that sort of show Bible that you refer to, particularly, in my case, I've got 12 books out now on this series, and I had already written it as 100 episodes for radio. So there's a lot of material about these characters, and there are several. So I need that reference to be able to go back and stay consistent. Either stay consistent or consciously show an evolution where, well, I no longer like minestrone soup. I'm sick of it. I'm never having it again. I'm switching to clam chowder. That's fine, but don't do it quixotically. Do it intentionally.
Hmm.
There's something interesting too that if your characters are vivid enough and fully realized, they will drive your story. Now, this
Hmm.
gets into a whole, discussion we could have sometime about, do you want to write plot driven or do you want to write character driven? There's no wrong answer. Those are both good ways to write a novel, but they are different. In my particular case, my stories are character driven. That means they're making decisions and I'm staying on track with what they would do. And I won't let them do what they wouldn't do, even if it would be more convenient for the plot.
Hmm.
If you're plot driven, then your characters are serving that plot. And there's on one end of the spectrum, there's fiction with velocity, which tends to be more of the plot driven. So if you think of Dan Brown and you think of those characters racing around Rome,
Differently plot.
it's all plot. There's very little real deep character development. And that's a fun read sometimes. Sometimes you're just in the mood.
Hmm.
I want to race around Rome. That's exactly what I want to do. That tends to be men's fiction. On the
Mm.
opposing end of the spectrum is women's fiction, which is full of detail. So let's say we have a dinner scene. If it's men's fiction, the man comes into the restaurant, checks everybody out, sits so that his back isn't to the main door, orders a steak. That's your scene. Women's fiction,
Mm.
the character comes in, notices the view, what color are the tablecloths, what kind of flowers are on the tables, what is the aroma of the roast that's being brought out from the kitchen. It's full of detail and it stimulates all 5 senses. So these are both very fun ways to read, and there are books that are closer to the middle that encompass some of both.
Mhm.
So as you develop your voice as an author, it's good to sort of find, where are you on that line? And then
And
that
it's good to
becomes,
know.
it is, it
Yeah.
becomes part of your voice. So for me, being a character driven, I actually think of this as almost a system of gears. So uh, Miranda is going this way, but she's come up against somebody else. So as she's turning, she's also causing the other character to turn a certain way, which is causing this character to move this away, which is causing this. You see what I mean? That there's this sense of interaction. There's a sense that nobody is an island, that all the characters are affecting one another positively or negatively, or in a joyful way, in an irritating way. But all of that adds to the richness, and readers can get engrossed in this world. It's like, uh-oh, here comes Del Mar down the street. Now what's going to happen when he comes into the diner? Because
Mhm.
Sally really didn't want to talk to him, but now she's stuck because she's working there today. But also she's having a private conversation with Samantha, and she doesn't want Randa to overhear it. So all of that only works if the characters are real to the reader by then. Otherwise, it's sort of a series of names and you can't keep track of what's going on. But the characters have really come to life. Then it's like, ooh, it's fun, it's rich.
Mm-hmm. So I'd love to, I don't know if I've ever asked you what seeded the idea of the Milford Haven concept, and that you would go to radio with it first.
A few things. From the macro view, I had been a journalist, and so I'm always interested in kind of trends that are going on in society. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw a trend of people leaving the big cities, going to smaller towns to create some vision of life, something that they had imagined and couldn't quite get to in the big
Mm-hmm.
city. Then I was invited. I only had lived, I grew up in Tokyo, then I lived in New York City and then Los Angeles, so I didn't know anything about little towns. But I was invited to spend a summer performing in a little coastal town. Well, I was fascinated. So, I was busy performing at night, but during the day, I wandered around, went into the cafes, introduced myself, met people, began to think, gee, this would make a great framework for a story. There's an anonymity in the big city that is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely missing in a small town. So you're living your life more publicly, whether you want to or not. If you park your car at the post office, then 42 people know that you went to the post office that day, you know,
In the small city, yeah, in
in
the
the small.
small community, yeah.
Right. And so that was interesting. And I it intrigued me. And then while I was performing this play, the owner of a radio station came backstage and said, gee, if you ever want to do something for radio, let me know. So now I had an open door. And so I sat down and wrote the first 4 scripts and started developing my characters and sent them to Wally Wallenbrock. And then
Mhm.
Wally didn't respond. And when I called the phone number, it had been changed. And so I thought, well, I better drive up there and see what's happening. It's about 4 hours north of LA. Well, the only time I had been to the radio station previously, his wife had a little pot of coffee on, and there were cute little curtains in the windows, and it was like a little house that they had turned into the local radio station. This time, there were 3 guys behind a desk. There were rock and roll posters all over the walls. There was a cloud of marijuana smoke and a month of dishes in the sink. And I said, is Wally here? And they said, no, he sold the station. Oh, I said, well, I've been sending scripts. And they said, oh yeah, Milford Haven. Yeah, we've been throwing those away.
Mm.
So I'm almost out the door, but I say, what if I got sponsors? And they were like, sponsors? So Judith, I walked up and down Main Street and I said, if I did a radio drama, would you support it? And I got $1,000 worth of commitment. Came back to the station and they're like, you're on the air. And I was like, oh, when? So I had to run back to LA. I had already lined up possible cast members who were friends from, I was working on Days of Our Lives, and one of them was working on As the World Turns, and one of them was doing a sitcom, and most of them said yes. And then I had to find a studio. I found my friend engineer Bill, and we went on the air. And it started from there.
And how did it end up with the BBC then? If it
We had,
started in LA, this is the first time I realized that. Yeah.
yeah, well, we had we had a big success in the Central Coast. We moved from that smaller station to a bigger one in San Luis Obispo, which is a college town. We had really good ratings. And then I got it on the air in another American city that's known for being a test city, which is Rochester, New York. So I
Hmm.
now had data, I had good solid data, and
Hmm.
I started trying to sell it to syndicators. To do that, I went to the National Association of Broadcasters. They have an annual convention, and this time it was in San Francisco. So I had a table. And you know what those events are like. You stand there
Hmm.
all day for 3 days in a row, saying the same thing over and over. And I had posters and so forth. It was towards the end of the last day, and two men came to my table and said, we've been looking for you. I was like, how can I help you? Call this woman. She's been trying to reach you. She's with the BBC. So word of my show had traveled to this innovative producer who was with Radio 5. She wanted to try new things. She wanted to import shows, which the Brits had not done previously. So I called her and we signed the first contract ever for an American radio serial to be broadcast on the BBC. Well, it was very exciting, but we also were worried because we were up against the best radio dramas in the English language on the BBC.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we didn't know if it would work. About 6 weeks in, she called, you might like to pop over. It's doing rather well. And I'm like, oh, what does rather well mean? She said 4.5 million listeners. So,
Mm.
we had what, 4,500 listeners in the US and 4.5 million in the UK. So that became our focus. And we had a
Hmm.
great run. It was a great experience.
So I think that I'm so glad you shared that, Mara, because I think it's important for people to understand that you may think the obvious, like right here in America, we have it is an American little city and fictional city, and those, but it's based on Cambria in the Central Coast. That and it turned out that the audience was thousands of miles away that would do the kickoff.
It is interesting that radio drama, the syndicators in New York that I talked to, they
Hmm.
said, did you notice that radio drama died before you were born? I said,
Wow.
I did notice that. I also noticed, look at our ratings. I said, look, here's the data. The audiences are enjoying. And so why not bring it back? It's a wonderful art form that people enjoy. And they said, well, we'll check the numbers. And I said, but there are
I
no
wonder if
numbers for you to check.
I wonder if the podcasts of the day are maybe kind of an evolution of those radio
Oh,
dramas
yes, definitely.
um, as we go along
Yeah.
on that.
Audio, what a fabulous way to enjoy a story.
Hmm.
You're driving, you're on a plane, you're doing the laundry, I don't care what you're doing. It's a millions of people enjoy
Exactly.
a story being
Hmm.
delivered by audio, no matter what the
Hmm.
delivery system is.
Hmm. And then your evolution, Mara, then you went to you had a radio drama, okay. And then what was the trigger that said, well, maybe we should do rewrites and turn it into a novel series?
I think it started with one of my interviews. I was interviewed by the Sunday Times in London and numerous newspapers. And I had suggested that in London, there is a publication similar to what we used to have, TV Guide, but it was
Hmm.
for radio. So it would offer recaps and news about different shows. And I said, well, we have a season and then we have a hiatus. During the hiatus, how about if we publish a little novelization of what just happened in the previous season? I thought readers would enjoy that. Well, publishers heard that, read that interview, and pretty soon I was being invited to meet with publishers in London. So
Hmm.
that's really how the book thing started. Though in my heart of hearts, even from a child, I knew I always wanted to write novels. I also knew I wasn't ready. So
Mm.
this was maybe my proving ground to finally get ready to write novels, because I think
Mm.
I'm now doing what I was really meant to do.
Well, we have maybe 5 minutes left. So, and that's kind of your yellow brick road, um, of how you put that all together. So if we come back to maybe some summation, because we didn't spend a lot of time on the Myers-Briggs. I mean, you talked about the personality sensing. So what would be something that we could do to kind of pull it together? Maybe some samples from, if you're reminding what you talked about, where your extroverted person is going to be energized by other people, anything getting outside. They are not claustrophobic. They are out and about, so to speak. Are uh, if you had a character who was an extrovert, they would be far easier to read. So, what kind of tales, for example, would they pop out with that you could take and run with?
If you're writing an extrovert, they're not going to sit still for very long in the house.
No.
So then what's their house going to look like? It may not look very evolved. I mean, you're an exception. But if somebody is, they'll clean up the kitchen, but you know what I mean? It isn't their happy
Hmm.
place. Their happy
Hmm.
place is, I'm back on the road. I'm going to be giving a talk in Austin. And from there, I'm going to Atlanta, and I can hardly wait. And I'm going to meet all these interesting people. And I'm just going to focus on being prepared for what I'm going to talk about. And I'm eager to hear what they have to say. It's all this interaction that an extroverted person will enjoy. And that's a
Hmm.
fun character to write and a fun character to read about too. Then, if you have that kind of character, I would say bring in somebody who's very different from that in your story. Somebody who understands and accepts, but maybe it's that character's mother. It's like, okay, dear, I understand. You have to go and do your thing. But while you're gone, you don't mind if I buy you some new sheets, do you? You know, just develop the personality. Is that a nurturing person? Is that somebody who gets their joy in life from helping others, and they're just so satisfied when they go home again and they've left something better because of their
Hmm.
efforts?
Hmm. Is there a kind of a little maybe an exercise that you can do shortly, but an exercise that maybe you can give our listener and viewers to do some practice of developing something using the color within and integrating a personality of some sort.
Well, how about writing a scene between two
Hmm.
characters? Maybe
Hmm.
these are two characters that are brand new to you. You don't know that much
Hmm.
about them yet.
Hmm.
Write the scene anyway. Now set it aside. Go back and do more homework about those characters. figure out the Myers-Briggs, figure out some color study about them. Now
Mhm.
come back and rewrite that scene and see how much richer it is, how much more engaging.
Mhm.
Let it continue to evolve. I think that would be, maybe I'll try that myself. I kind of like that idea.
That sounds perfect. Well, Mara Purl, thank you so much. I mean, I
Oh,
loved getting more insight of how this all came about, your series. And as everyone I've said that Mara was really ahead of the game of bringing the small town and really the saga, the continuing characters, versus the big city and all the noise. You have totally different types of noise with this
mhm,
kind of writing, and to
very
see
much so.
other really well-known authors pick up and copy what she was doing. So,
Yeah, it's become a big thing, hasn't it, in women's fiction? Um,
mhm.
and it's interesting. Hadn't been aware until recently about some of the dates, but I'm several years before the others who have gotten well known in this. So that's fun. I enjoy being a trailblazer.
Trailblazer, pioneers, so much more. All right, thank you so
Thank you
much
so much,
for,
Judith. Always a pleasure.
oh, you're so welcome. All right, everyone. We're going to have a wrap up and we will see you next week. We're going to be deep diving into some editing strategies. And then I am going to end the month with how do you get in bookstores? All the tips, strategies, techniques to make a beloved author who is always welcome back to a bookstore, whether you want to bring back your old book again and again and sell copies, or you've got something brand spanking new. So we'll be getting into that. All right, everyone, have a grand week writing forward. This is Judith Briles.